he's writing about all kinds of things, right? He covers Ole Miss, he covers SMU, and he covers all things college football for On3 Sports. We're talking about the one, the only, Mr. Billy Embody. Billy, glad to have you on short notice. Appreciate you getting back to me, my friend. Let's call it what it is. SMU, biggest football game they've had in probably 30, 40 years. And then you get the news today that Rhett Lashley saying, look, I've got guys calling my guys, trying to get him in the portal, trying to get him to leave, all this kind of stuff. What are you hearing as far as, what's going on with this SMU football team? And I'm sure they're not the only ones that are dealing with it. But, again, when you have success, these sort of things happen. Just how bad is it getting right now for SMU on that front?
Yeah, I will say I don't think it's as bad as Rhett Lashley was talking about from the standpoint of they're going to potentially lose guys. They've done a good job of building up a nice NIL war chest, and they took care of Kevin Jennings, the starting quarterback, and they have a lot of guys who today announced that they are locked in, guys that a lot of programs would love to have and have probably hit up about entering the portal and saying, hey, we can do this, we can do that for you to try to get them to come on over. But it is the reality of college football today. And it's almost more so the back channeling of, if guys have agents, guys have family members, guys have high school coaches, maybe even past coaches that they've played for. It's all over the place when it comes to, hey, what do you think about coming over here? We've got a little bit better opportunity. You don't have to battle this guy. We might be able to throw a little bit more NIL your way. And that is the name of the game right now in college football. It's trying to tip someone in to the transfer portal, and that window is obviously open right now. It opened the Monday after the conference championship games for colleges, and it runs through the first round of the college football playoff towards the end of the month of December. And so you're playing defense as a college coach right now while at the same time having to go on the offensive. One thing that Rhett Lashley and his staff and staffs across the country are fighting right now, in a sense, is if you're in a bowl game or if you're in the college football playoff, you're having to also bring your next round of transfer portal additions onto campus and try to recruit them and target them to then fill maybe a spot that you need an upgrade at, or just fill a spot where a guy is going to leave and graduate and things like that. So like Rhett said today, there's no other sport in the country that has free agency during its season, and especially during the postseason. So this is kind of that wild piece of college football that, at some point maybe it gets solved, but that's never going to stop somebody from trying to get the edge on another team.
No, it certainly isn't. Billy Embody, On3 Sports, covers SMU, among others, talking to us here on the D&M Leasing Hotline. And, of course, you brought up the fact that Penn State, who they're going to be playing this weekend, lost their backup quarterback. And so I guess my question is for you, and this will be the last thing I say about the NIL and as far as the transfer portal is concerned, is for as many coaches that have raised a stink about this situation, and, again, since it's kind of taken away from the college football playoff right now, which is probably more detrimental than anything when it comes to a hype aspect and where our eyeballs are going, do you expect that there will be some movement made by next year, or at the very least in the next 2 years, where they will move this transfer portal date?
Yeah, I don't know how you solve it at any point over the next, however many years, because the calendar is what the calendar is.
Yeah.
These guys get done with the regular season, and then they've got to, if they're lucky, they go into postseason, and then they go in, if they're really lucky, go into the college football playoff, which has to happen relatively soon after the season ends in December, in early December, the regular season. And then you have the start of the spring semester. So now there is one relatively easy fix. It would be to eliminate the December portal window and say, you know what, you've signed on to be at X college. You had a coaching change. Tough luck. Why don't you try the next coach? You'll continue to build your progress towards a degree, which I think is a lost thing in this as well. And then you can decide if you like the new coaches, if you don't like the new transfers they've brought in, or however recruiting has worked out. You can decide all of that in the spring, finish out a normal academic year, and then make a change. I think that's something that should probably be looked at. But in the day and age of, hey, let's bring in 15 early enrollees from high school so those guys can get an edge, it's the same thing. These college coaches, they want guys on campus in January because they've got 15 spring practices. And to Rhett's credit, he also brought up hey, maybe we don't do spring ball, we do OTAs. And, we bring him in June and we get 5 OTAs, and he didn't say 5, but just 5 OTAs in June, and then we go back to summer conditioning and then fall camp. I think that's a very normal model when you're kind of trending towards a professional league anyway.
Billy, this has been on my head for a while, and I'm glad we got you on the phone here so I can ask you this. Do you think that college players have lost the whole point of going to college football to be able to transition into the National Football League if they're grateful enough and being at the right programs, whether that be at Georgia or Texas or in Alabama and Oregon, whatever it may be, going to these certain powerhouse schools to set themselves up. Now it's turned into the money game. How much of recruiting now has to do with literally just who can pay me the most, not what program is the best fit for me and for my future?
Yeah, I was actually talking to a couple coaches over the course of the last 2 weeks, and they'll say, man, we think we had a great visit, or so-and-so really feels like a good fit here. And then you kind of fast forward a week and maybe the guy goes somewhere else, and you kind of reach back out and you say, hey, what happened? You guys maybe were right in the mix there. And guy goes, yeah, he said all the right things. And then all of a sudden, an agent or the player says, okay, all right, but let's talk about NIL and what, I need a little bit more because so-and-so is offering this. And college coaches are sitting there like, well, I thought it wasn't all about the money. You looked at our development, or you looked at our offense, or you looked at our defense in terms of, developing players and, putting them in the league or trying to win a national championship too. All of those things all of a sudden not necessarily go away from every player, but it's a large part of the discussion now around NIL. And I think there are certain positions that are wildly overspent on each cycle. And I think for example, this cycle, I would say is wide receiver. I think there's guys, probably a dozen that are going to creep in, or if not go over that $1 million mark to be a number one, to be that dude on campus, Eric Singleton Jr. And I think he deserves it out of Georgia Tech. He's a huge name, going to command a huge NIL deal, but there are others that are maybe not as accomplished and high of an upside as him that are looking for that type of a payday, maybe around $800,000-900K. And you're like, man, that just, at that rate, you could sign 4 really solid 4-star, maybe even top 150 high school guys and let them fight it out, see who pans out. And you've, helped your chances of getting a guy. It's a wild world with the transfer portal and NIL. And I think the guys, to your point about forgetting where they, maybe hope to play college football and the reasons for playing college football, have lost it is, it's business now. There are agents involved. There is that ability to make money. And I do think there is maybe an overvalue that some players are maybe going to find out over the course of rev share, that they aren't necessarily in a true cap situation worth as much as they are currently with collectives. But that'll come, and that's a different discussion. But, I think it's a lost, talking point about getting a degree. I talked about this at our website on the Pony Express, and when SMU lost to 2 starters last year in the spring on the offensive line, and they were guys that were developed by SMU. They stuck through a coaching change. Coach Lashley, their staff, they also brought in more players, but they were starting. I would have expected them to probably start this year, and they had played and started at least 3 years or 2 or 3 years on SMU's team, and they were 1 year away from finishing out their college career and probably going to the NFL. And both of them left and went to other programs. And you want to know what? Unfortunately for them, not all the SMU alums that they built relationships with over those 3 or 4 years are going to be ready to, hey, I'll help you with a job if your career doesn't work out. I'll do this, I'll do that. If you would have stayed, because, hey, when SMU needed you, when you were making a move to the ACC, you left. And so I think kids also underestimate maybe the value of the network that they can build at programs like SMU and across the country as well.
And Billy, I kind of look at a scope of not just college football, but the NFL. What do you think the NFL is looking at when they see all these kids that maybe they have their eye on, because we know scouts are looking at guys from when they're in high school, and they see this kid transferring 2, 3, 4 times. They see a kid not being committed to a certain spot, see them maybe not in the structure they wanted them to. They're in Kirby Smart's structure for a year or two, and then they transfer to some Big Ten school or ACC school. Do you think it's starting to have an effect on the type of players that are coming into the National Football League?
You know, that's a really good question. I will even say they see them transfer 2 or 3 times in high school.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the wild piece of it as well. And I don't know how much it impacts the obviously flow of talent. That's always going to be there. I think trying to manage the new era of players coming into the league from all sorts of different walks of college experiences, whether it be an SMU or a Georgia or, you know, even those guys that come from FCS and, you know, group of 5 schools. I mean, there are some really good players that find their way into the league and they end up, you know, making millions and sticking around for 10, 12, 15 years. And they didn't go to a name brand school or were a 5-star. So much of evaluation for the college level needs to really try to find a sweet spot of, hey, this guy is uber talented, but does he truly love football? That's the hardest thing to find out. That's what NFL scouts and GMs are trying to find out. And in college, when you jump around a few different places, it does make it harder to find out, which for the player kind of helps. You know, if the guy's a 5-star, if he was highly thought of, super athletic, and run, do all those things, well, an NFL GM is going to take a chance on you. You know, even if you maybe bounce around and you don't have as great of a college career as maybe you were thought to have, should have, as a 5-star or as a top 100 kid, you can kind of hide a little bit, and then you can go to the league and be a pro. You don't have to deal with school. You don't have to deal with this. You don't have to deal with that. And then maybe you flourish with, you know, being on your own and not having to deal with school, or you're just that same guy that, you know, didn't really want to stick it out in certain situations and work hard, and you moved around and you just were able to make your one payday and that's it. And you're out in 2 or 3 years. Because that's still the same league it is.
Billy Embody on 3 Sports covers SMU on 3 as well. Let me ask you this. You've got a SMU team traveling to Pennsylvania. Much has been made about the cold weather, the snow. This is, I mean, obviously we're in Dallas. It was what, a comfortable 75 degrees today here in the Metroplex. So needless to say, we're not looking forward to any snow anytime soon. How much stock are you putting into the weather, and how much stock is Rhett Lashley and his staff putting into the weather this weekend?
Yeah, you know, I think the weather is going to be cold. It could impact SMU. It could impact Penn State. Just because they live up there doesn't make it not cold for them. And Penn State, it being a national brand, recruits fairly well, you know, across the country in some cases. But it is that ability to be up there and be able to practice in it. It's a little bit different. But for SMU, and this is cliche, but their mindset is the most important thing when it comes to this game. If they get off the bus and they feel like they can play free because there's no pressure on them, they're the underdog, they lost their ACC championship game, they, you know, quote unquote, snuck into the college football playoff, things like that, and they can just let it fly because no one's expecting them to win, that's probably the biggest thing that can happen for this team versus, okay, what's the weather going to be like? Because the team that was dominant in ACC play for much of they went unbeaten, but in terms of dominance for much of the year, that was the team that got off the bus against Florida State and said, nobody's expecting us to win, but we can take it to these guys. Louisville on the road, noon game, a really highly thought of Louisville team. They took it to them, and they didn't care that it was a loud, raucous crowd. It's not like Penn State, but Louisville's a really good team in terms of their talent and the guys that they have that you've got to defend. And SMU will see some guys like Abdul Carter that are freaks and that are going to be top 10 pick. Tyler Warren's the best tight end in college football, or one of. And so they've got to contend with that. The mindset that they've got to have is a shift from what they experienced against Clemson, because they got ready for Clemson and they showed it by the end of the game and in the second half and much of the, I would say 2.5 quarters that they could absolutely have beat the brakes off of Clemson if they had just gotten off the bus and been ready to go. And with 30 seniors, getting that mindset is much more important than the weather, and that's kind of how they're treating it.
Well, I'll tell you what, like you said, is it going to be second half SMU that shows up, or is it going to be first half SMU that shows up? And, of course, like you said, if it's second half SMU, you got to like your chances. Real quick, got about 30 seconds. Again, I know you cover the entire, I know you got an eye on all things college football. Much has been made about Oregon and who they have to play. Who's the one team right now, if you said, all right, look, I this is my unofficial pick to win the entire thing, who do you like?
Oh, man. That is, honestly, I think probably Oregon.
Okay.
I just think they've been able to run through, the Big Ten schedule. They've played at a really high level offensively. Dan Lanning's a really good, especially modern coach. I just think he adapts so well. I'm a huge fan of his. But, yeah, in terms of just true pick to win it all, I know they're the top-ranked team and everything and undefeated. But, I mean, you got to give that credit. And I think Georgia's shown holes, Texas, Clemson, SMU has shown holes, Boise, Penn State, Ohio State. I mean, you can just kind of go on. But the one constant this year, as much as, you can kind of say, okay, they're the Big Ten, not the SEC, is Oregon. I mean, they are that. I think they're that good that they've got a pretty darn good shot to win it all.
Tell the folks at home, Billy, where they can find you at on the old X and socials.
Yeah, you can follow me at Billy Embody, Embody, and follow us at ontheponyexpress.com. You can sign up for just $1 for your first week, so come and join the message board.
Billy, great stuff from you, my friend. Let's do this again after SMU pulls the upset this weekend.
Yeah, let's plan on that. I like that.
I love
Appreciate it, guys.
Hey, absolutely.